The first sound in the county courthouse that morning was not a voice. It was a cashier check sliding across old oak. And the second sound was the clerk reading the number twice because she thought she misread it the first time. $826,000, paid in full for 280 acres. No lender packet attached. No mortgage document waiting for signature. No second meeting with a loan committee. Travis Ramsey stood there in a faded work coat, with feed dust still on one sleeve, looking like a man who had come in to settle a fence dispute. Not close, one of the largest cash farmland purchases the county had seen in years. He was 43 that February in 2024, and by 2025, at 44, that same closing would become the number everyone repeated. The clerk stamped the deed. A young attorney representing the estate looked at Travis, looked at Nora Ramsey, then looked again at the check as if some page was missing from the folder. Nora had brought every page. She always did. She had a leather ledger bag, 2 pens, and a printed balance summary, showing they entered closing with $1,114,000 in liquid reserve before the purchase. After title fees and transfer costs, the reserve dropped, but the land was theirs with no note and no lien. Word moved fast because courthouse hallways are faster than social media in a farm county. By noon, Dale Henson at Henson Ag Equipment had heard the number, and by 2 o'clock, Travis walked into Dale's showroom to pick up hydraulic couplers he had ordered. Dale had laughed at him 5 years earlier when Travis asked for cash price on a tractor package and declined financing at 8.25% over 7 years. Dale still smiled the same way, only this time he smiled slower. He rang up the parts and, out of habit, asked whether Travis wanted it put on account. Travis said, short as ever, "I will pay now." No speech followed. No victory lap. Travis set down his card, took the receipt, nodded once, and walked out into a lot full of high-gloss machines with monthly payments attached to each one. Dale watched him leave and understood a little more than he had that morning. The old truck in the parking lot had never been evidence of failure. It had been evidence of priorities. That moment only made sense if you knew what happened in March 2020, when the bank had already marked Ramsey Farms as a likely loss and tightened credit to a level that should have finished the operation within 1 season. The farm had been written off in local language, not forgiven in legal terms. The debt stayed real. The options disappeared. That is where the real story starts. Travis and Nora had built their routine on paper before sunrise. Coffee at 5:15, weather check at 5:20, ledger review at 5:30. Ramsey Farms in 2017 worked 460 acres total, 180 owned and 280 rented. 2 poor crop years had left them carrying $312,000 in term debt. Their numbers were not catastrophic at that stage, yet they had no cushion against another bad cycle. Travis knew exactly where every dollar sat because he had written it down in 3 places: field notebook, shopboard, and Nora's monthly books. Travis had grown up around men who explained themselves loudly. He chose the opposite method early, partly temperament and partly memory. At 16, he stood with his father outside a machinery auction, where a neighbor's combine sold for less than the cost of 1 replacement engine. His father never gave him a speech. He just said, "Debt makes weather louder." Travis carried that sentence into adulthood, and Nora translated it into policy. Every purchase got one question written at the top: will this still make sense in a drought and in a price collapse during the same year? That question kept them slower than neighbors in expansion years. It also kept them alive when timelines tightened. Through 2017 and 2018, they made incremental repairs instead of upgrades. They postponed a new planter monitor package. They bought used row units and rebuilt bearings in winter. They sold 2 underused gravity wagons for $7,400 and applied every dollar to principal. By December 2018, term debt moved from $312,000 to $294,000. Not dramatic, real. The pressure rose in 2019. Late planning compressed their schedule, and weak corn prices cut the margin they needed to service both input costs and debt reduction. Their operating line limit at the regional bank was $185,000. They did not draw all of it, but the limit existed as breathing room. By harvest, Marlene Pike at the bank recalculated risk using lower projected cash flow and higher volatility assumptions across the county. Ramsey Farms dropped a full risk category. Marlene was not a villain in this. She followed policy manuals built after earlier credit crises. Her job required protecting depositor capital first. She met Travis with clear language, no theater, no false optimism. March 2020, renewal meeting, 10:30 in the morning, conference room with laminated rate cards on the wall. She declined full renewal of the $185,000 line and approved a reduced line of $60,000, conditioned on tighter collateral controls and monthly cash reporting. She also presented a liquidation pathway packet in case operations could not stabilize. The packet changed the next decision. $60,000 could not cover their normal season plan if a major tractor failed. Their primary high horsepower unit already had rising hydraulic lag and transmission slip under load. A replacement quote from Dale Henson sat in Travis's folder from earlier that winter, $118,000, with dealer financing at 8.25% over 7 years. The rough annual payment landed around $22,000 once fees and timing differences were included. Travis had stared at that quote for days because the machine would have solved horsepower reliability in one move, and the payment would have put a permanent hand around their throat. He drove home after the bank meeting, did not speak for the first 12 miles, and parked by the shop. Nora opened the packet and read it in silence. The obstacle was cleanly defined now. They could not buy reliability through debt. They had to find reliability through low-cost machinery, salvage, repair, and labor they performed themselves. That afternoon, they wrote the rule that governed every machinery decision until cash flow recovered. No financed replacement, and no equipment purchase unless it could be bought outright and kept within a hard-stop budget. One path required permission. The other required time and stubbornness. 3 weeks later, in April 2020, Travis hauled a load of screenings near Doss Feedlot and noticed a shape behind the south fence line, half hidden by old bunks and a stack of cracked mineral tubs. It was a 1979 Steiger S T325, articulated frame, faded green paint gone chalky, left rear tire sunk into mud, cab glass intact, hood open, no battery in place. Feedlot owner Calvin Doss used that corner as overflow equipment graveyard. The tractor had not moved in years. Travis stopped, climbed down, and walked the perimeter with the same expression he used for checking fence posts: neutral, careful, no premature hope. He looked at the frame rails first. Straight. He checked for visible case cracks near transmission mounts. None. He pulled the dipstick, dark oil, no glitter. He opened a hydraulic line and found contamination, not metal sludge. Then he checked the transmission case and driveline mounts one more time, because that was the salvage question that mattered most, and when both checked out, he had his answer. This dead Steiger was salvageable, with cash parts and owner labor. Calvin came out wiping his hands on a towel and laughed in the practical way of a man who has seen too many rescue attempts fail. He said, "If you can drag it out, I will be glad to see daylight back there." Travis asked what he wanted for it. Calvin said he had turned down scrap offers because hauling cost made them pointless. He named $7,800 if Travis handled transport and signed a no-return bill of sale. Travis said, "I will come tomorrow with a trailer." That price set the entire next chain of events. At $7,800, the risk became survivable. At $118,000 financed, one breakdown year could erase them. Calvin's willingness to treat yard cleanup as value opened a door the bank could never open. They hauled the Steiger home at dawn. Nora entered the purchase the same morning. $7,800 cash. Category machinery salvage. Note attached. Strategic replacement deferred debt. She also wrote a second line under it. Maximum parts budget, before stop decision. $20,000 total, including purchase. That gave Travis boundaries and permission at the same time. From May through August 2020, the shop became a reconstruction line. Travis tore the drivetrain down in sequence to avoid compounding errors. He tagged every bolt in coffee cans labeled by subsystem. The first major setback came in week 2, when he found scoring in a hydraulic pump housing that could have killed pressure under heavy drawbar load. New old stock was unavailable. He called 6 salvage yards over 4 states and located a compatible pump core in North Dakota for $1,900 plus freight. Delay, yes. Dead end, no. The second setback hit at the articulation joint. Bushings were beyond tolerance, and one pin had pitting deep enough to risk uneven wear. Machine shop turnaround was 9 days longer than quoted, because pandemic staffing cuts had reduced shifts. Travis used that waiting window to rebuild cab wiring and replace brittle hydraulic hoses. Nora tracked every receipt with date, vendor, and tax treatment. By August 28th, total repair parts cash cost was $16,400, bringing full machine cost to $24,200, including purchase, with 0 paid shop labor because Travis did all labor himself. No one on that farm pretended labor was free. Nora wrote opportunity cost estimates in a side notebook and left them off the operational ledger for pacing clarity. Time spent rebuilding came from sleep, and from work windows he would have spent on lower priority maintenance. The choice remained rational because every hour in the shop replaced future cash outflow they could not survive. They fired the ST-325 for the first sustained idle on September 2nd, 2020. Exhaust cleared after 20 seconds. Oil pressure held in target range. Hydraulic temperature rose slower than expected, then stabilized. Travis did not smile, at least not where anyone could see it. He shut it down, retorqued 2 fittings, restarted, and drove circles in the gravel lot while Nora watched from the shop door, counting seconds between gear engagement and response lags. By fall tillage, the salvage question was closed in practice. The dead Steiger was field-ready and carrying load across Ramsey acres. That one machine resolved a specific hesitation that had blocked every planting plan since the bank meeting. Before the rebuild, they could not guarantee horsepower for critical field windows without new borrowing. After the rebuild, they could plant and till on schedule with existing cash resources. Reliability was never perfect. It became good enough to keep acres productive, and good enough changed their balance sheet. The first full season test in 2021 came during a wet spring that compressed planting days into narrow windows. The rebuilt Steiger pulled primary tillage while their older unit handled lighter passes. Breakdowns occurred, 2 hydraulic leaks and 1 starter issue. yet each repair stayed within cash maintenance capacity. Because they avoided the financed replacement payment, approximately $22,000 remained in annual cash flow. They split that buffer 3 ways: input flexibility, principal paydown, and reserve. By December 2021, term debt dropped from $294,000 at end 2018 to $248,000. The curve had finally steepened downward. Nora kept a wall chart in the office with color bars: red for debt, blue for liquid reserve. Red bars shrank for the first time fast enough to feel like movement. Blue bars started to matter. Across the road, Eli Navarro had made the conventional expansion choice in 2020. He leased additional acres and financed precision upgrades, confident that scale and efficiency would outrun financing costs. His optimism was not foolish in ordinary years. His spreadsheets looked sound under baseline assumptions. The underlying risk sat in sequence sensitivity. 1 weak price cycle plus 1 rate move could break coverage. He accepted that risk because many operations had won the same bet before him. And by 2022, he had refinanced to keep those notes current, tying repayment to acres he needed to keep control of. Joanne and Rick Bell, close friends of the Ramseys, faced a different trap. Their cattle operation carried variable rate debt tied to feed infrastructure and herd expansion. Early rates felt manageable. Rate resets in 2022 changed the monthly load faster than their herd margins could absorb. They worked harder, sold equipment, deferred family spending, and still watched required payments outpace cash coming in during bad feed months. The county felt fine from the highway in 2021 and 2022. Green fields, full grain bins, new pickups at church. Under the surface, debt service ratios were tightening. Travis and Nora saw it in small signs first. Late custom invoices, parts accounts stretched to net 90. Neighbors asking if they knew who might rent out old tillage tools cheap for 1 season. Ramsey Farms kept pressing the same approach because each cycle reinforced it. 2022 closed with term debt at $186,000. They resisted 2 upgrade temptations, 1 planter package and 1 guidance system bundle, both offered with promotional financing. Dale Henson called twice, explained tax benefits, and framed low monthly payments as strategic flexibility. Travis asked cash price both times, wrote the numbers in his notebook, and declined. Dale read that as inability. He had a template in his mind for what successful operators looked like, and Travis did not fit it. Worn coat, old truck, rebuilt tractor, cash questions first. Dale was not uniquely cruel. He represented a prevailing consensus that visible replacement schedules reflected health. In that framework, Travis looked cornered. Marlene Pike at the bank tracked Ramsey differently. Monthly reports from Nora arrived on time and reconciled cleanly. Expense variance notes were detailed enough to make risk committee review easier. Marlene still kept the operating line at $60,000 through 2022 because policy required caution after downgrade, yet her internal comments shifted from likely loss containment to improving borrower discipline with constrained leverage. Travis never saw those comments. He did not need to. He could feel the direction through fewer warning letters. 2023 became the hinge year. Input costs stayed high, financing costs rose countywide, and rent negotiations sharpened because landowners wanted security from tenants with stronger balance sheets. Operations carrying heavy debt had little room left. Eli Navarro entered spring with multiple obligations stacked on optimistic yield assumptions. Mid-season weather and price movement reduced expected margin enough that one landlord declined lease renewal for the next year, citing concerns about payment certainty. By November 2023, Eli lost a key block of leased acres that had anchored his scale plan, and that lease loss broke the repayment path on the notes he had refinanced around that acreage. He did not lose his knowledge or his work ethic. He lost the acreage structure that made his debt model function. Joanne and Rick Bell held on through summer with painful culling and aggressive feed purchasing strategy, hoping winter contracts would stabilize. The rate resets did not ease. In November 2023, they made the decision every cattle family dreads: full herd dispersal. The sale yard was quiet in the worst way, full of people who knew exactly what that day meant and said very little. Their debt did not vanish. It became manageable only after liquidating the herd they had built for years. Those two events changed Travis's social position without changing his behavior. He had warned no one, lectured no one, celebrated nothing. He kept running numbers and fixing equipment. The county saw the same facts through a different lens once losses became visible. The risk he had avoided for years was no longer abstract theory. It had faces and names he cared about. Ramsey Farms closed 2023 with term debt reduced to $91,000 and liquid reserve building toward 7 figures. The rebuilt Steiger continued to run with scheduled maintenance and occasional parts replacement, each repair cheaper than 1 month of the finance payment they had declined in 2020. Their reserve accumulation came from many small decisions: maintenance over replacement, cash discounts on inputs, disciplined family draw, and strict separation between operating account and reserve account. Nora enforced that separation with near-judicial consistency. By January 2024, a distressed estate parcel came to market. 280 contiguous acres with drainage repairs needed, and tenant uncertainty depressing bitter confidence. County average land chatter sat above that number, yet this parcel carried enough friction to thin the room. Travis had watched it for months because adjacency mattered, and because owning more acres outright shifted long-term resilience more than any machinery upgrade ever could. They entered February auction with $1,114,000 in cash reserve before purchase. Nora had prepared 3 scenarios: win at target, walk away above threshold, or split parcel if bidding structure changed. Travis set his personal ceiling where post-purchase reserve would still cover worst-case operating shocks without immediate credit expansion. Bidding opened low, climbed in uneven jumps, stalled twice when drainage concerns resurfaced, then settled at $2,950 per acre. Travis raised once more and held. Final, 280 acres at $2,950, total $826,000. The arithmetic was exact and the decision immediate because they had already done the hard thinking at home. At closing, they paid cash. That purchase resolved the acreage ceiling that had constrained their growth options. It also changed how every prior sacrifice looked in retrospect. The old truck, deferred upgrades, rebuilt salvage tractor, strict household spending, each one had functioned as a transfer from appearance into ownership. The public reversal in 2025 arrived because records are public and people talk. The deed transfer from February 2024 had circulated for months, and by 2025, even people who ignored courthouse filings had heard the same number enough times to stop dismissing it as rumor. Tax rolls updated. Dale Henson heard first and doubted until he checked. Marlene Pike saw updated collateral and liquidity positions and invited Nora in for Treasury Services review, not credit restructuring. Same bank building, different posture. Marlene explained that with debt retiring and the reserve strength growing, they qualified for no-debt Treasury account services designed for cash management efficiency, sweep options, and insured allocation. The bank that had restricted them in 2020 now competed to hold their deposits in 2025. No one apologized in dramatic language because institutions do not move that way. They move through forms and service tiers. Travis accepted useful services and left everything else alone. The dealership scene happened 3 weeks later. Travis needed parts and asked for them. Dale gave the quote and slipped into familiar financing talk before catching himself. Travis paid cash at the counter as always. Dale glanced through the showroom window at Travis's truck and said, trying for neutral, "I guess that old thing still runs." Travis said, "It starts every morning." He picked up the box and left. The gap between perception and arithmetic had closed, and Travis did nothing to force that closure. The numbers did the work on their own schedule. Once the farm stabilized, a different problem appeared: survivor's guilt with practical edges. Travis and Nora had made it through by strategy and discipline, yet they had done it in a community where good people got cornered by structures that looked safe until rates and prices moved together. They could have kept every gain private. Instead, they built a support framework that preserved dignity and required accountability. And they built it around the debt trajectories they had watched up close: variable rate pressure for the Bells and acreage tied note pressure for Eli. Nora established a cash reserve trust structure in 2025 to separate household security from community lending commitments. The trust began with $300,000 allocated from retained earnings, managed with written terms, monthly reporting, and clear repayment triggers tied to harvest outcomes rather than punitive calendars. Travis insisted on one principle: help must keep people operating without pushing them deeper into leverage dependence. First recipient was Joanne and Rick Bell. After herd dispersal, they still held skill, infrastructure, and 80 acres they wanted to keep productive while rebuilding. Travis and Nora offered an $80,000 zero-interest operating bridge through the trust, 12-month term renewable, once if reporting stayed transparent. The money covered seed, fertilizer, fence repair, and working capital for a reduced-risk forage and calf backgrounding plan on leased background. They also leased back 80 acres to the Bells at a below-market rate for 2 seasons, structured to let them rebuild cash instead of feeding interest. Second recipient was Eli Navarro. Losing leased acres in 2023 had broken his grain scale model, yet his technical ability and application work remained valuable. Travis helped him map a transition into custom spraying, a business requiring less fixed land control and more timing skill. The trust provided $65,000 at zero interest for used sprayer upgrades, licensing costs, and initial fuel float. Eli repaid through per-acre service revenue with seasonal payment windows. Travis also contracted Eli first on Ramsey Acres to establish base utilization during launch season. The multiplier effect became visible quickly. Bells kept their operation alive, hired one part-time hand by late 2025, and resumed local feed purchases. Eli's custom spraying business serviced 11 clients in the first season, which supported his own family income and improved application timeliness for neighboring farms that no longer had in-house capacity. One disciplined balance sheet began transmitting stability outward. Travis did not become a county philosopher. He stayed a working farmer who preferred torque specs to speeches. His generosity followed the same logic as his savings: specific, documented, and tied to durable outcomes. Nora made sure every agreement had dates, amounts, and exit paths, so help would not turn into hidden resentment or endless dependency. Ramsey Farms itself kept evolving with the same restraint. The 280-acre purchase in 2024 brought owned acreage from 180 to 460. They retained selected rented ground where terms remained fair, which increased total farmed acres while reducing vulnerability to lease shocks. Capital spending stayed selective. Instead of replacing every older unit, they prioritized reliability points that protected planting and harvest windows. The Steiger remained in rotational use with scheduled maintenance, no longer a desperate gamble, now part of a diversified equipment plan. By end of 2025, the full ledger told the story without adjectives. Term debt retired. Owned land increased to 460 acres. Cash systems formalized under Nora's management. Community support trust active with documented repayments beginning. Net worth, $3,470,000. That number did not appear overnight, and it did not come from one lucky auction. It came from a sequence where each constraint forced a disciplined choice. Credit restriction, in March 2020, blocked conventional replacement financing, which pushed Travis toward salvage search. Salvage search found the dead Steiger behind Calvin Doss's Feedlot. The successful rebuild restored horsepower capacity without new debt. Preserved cash flow accelerated principal reduction during 2021 through 2023. Lower leverage created reserve strength before the distressed land auction. Reserve strength enabled a cash purchase in 2024. Cash ownership and continued discipline produced the 2025 balance sheet and the capacity to help others. Every named person in that chain reached a distinct endpoint. Calvin Doss cleared a dead machine from his yard and kept trading cattle, later telling neighbors he had underestimated how much life was left in old iron if someone patient owned it. Marlene Pike maintained policy discipline through the downturn, then transitioned the Ramseys into Treasury services once their profile changed. A quiet institutional acknowledgement that risk had moved from concern to strength. Dale Henson continued selling new machinery, though he stopped assuming a cash question signaled weakness after Travis's purchase records became public. Joanne and Rick Bell rebuilt from the hardest year of their lives, sold the herd when they had to, then returned through a smaller model on leased 80 acres with lower exposure and better sleep. Eli Navarro lost core leases, shifted into custom spraying, and turned technical skill into a service business that fit the new credit environment better than grain expansion had. Nora Ramsey became the structural center of the whole operation. Bookkeeper in title, chief financial architect in reality. Travis kept doing what he had always done. Maintain what you own, write down the numbers, avoid decisions that require perfect weather to survive. One county commissioner later asked Travis whether he ever felt tempted to correct people when they assumed he was broke. Travis answered with the same understatement he used everywhere else. I had work to do. That sentence captures the psychological core of the story. He did not perform poverty, and he did not perform wealth. He performed maintenance, record-keeping, and patience under social pressure. The rest was arithmetic. The arithmetic also explains the title line people repeated for months. He found a dead Steiger behind a feedlot, and it resurrected a farm the bank had already written off. Written off in conversation meant the bank had charged down expected loss and restricted credit, not forgiven legal obligations. That distinction matters because the comeback was not debt relief, granted from outside. It was debt survived from inside through operational choices that widen resilience one season at a time. In practical terms, the resurrected Steiger represented more than machinery. It represented control over timing. High horsepower windows in spring and fall decide yield potential and soil structure outcomes. Missing those windows because of equipment shortage can erase a season's margin quickly. The rebuilt ST-325 gave Ramsey Farms enough drawbar capacity to hit field windows when they opened, which protected revenue consistency and made debt paydown possible. Remove that machine from the timeline and the rest of the sequence probably fails. When people ask where stealth wealth actually hides, this story gives a clear framework. It hides in the mismatch between visible consumption and invisible ownership. Travis looked poor by showroom standards for years because he drove old equipment and delayed replacements. Underneath, he was converting every avoided payment into equity and reserve. Debt finance growth can look stronger in good years, and many strong operators use debt well. Yet leverage has an asymmetry in agriculture that never disappears. Upside can be incremental. Downside can be total. Travis structured his farm to avoid total downside first, then let upside arrive slower. The data wall that bores people in weaker stories stayed alive here because each number corresponded to a lived scene. 7,800 was Calvin's yard cleanup price on a dead tractor that could have remained scrap. 16,400 was months of late-night parts receipts and grease-stained hands. 60,000 was the operating line that forced invention and locked them into a low-cost machinery strategy they could execute without asking permission from a lender. 118,000 at 8.25% over 7 years was the polished alternative that would have looked better and tightened the noose. 22,000 was the approximate annual payment that stayed in Ramsey cash flow and became future land equity. 826,000 was the courthouse check in February 2024 that turned into the county's public reversal by 2025. Nora's role deserves explicit weight in that chain. Precision without emotional steadiness fails under stress, and steadiness without precision fails in finance. She held both. During the hardest months, she tracked line-by-line cash movement while absorbing fear without spreading it. She pushed back when Travis wanted to stretch parts budgets past their stop line. She moved fast when opportunities met pre-written criteria. In 2025, she formalized the reserve trust so generosity could scale without destabilizing the home operation. Quiet competence at that level rarely gets filmed, even though it decides outcomes. By late 2025, Ramsey Farms looked different in structure and similar in daily rhythm. Owned acres had expanded. Debt had disappeared. Community relationships had deepened through practical help. Morning routine remained coffee, weather, ledgers. Travis still wore the same coat until Nora finally replaced the zipper and told him that counted as maintenance, not luxury. He accepted that ruling. The Steiger still sat in the main machine line, paint faded, hydraulics responsive, frames straight, evidence that salvage can outrun status if judgment is accurate. Newer units came and went around the county. The old ST-325 kept earning its place because it had already paid for itself many times over through avoided financing and preserved timing windows. When younger farmers asked about it, Travis gave short answers, usually technical, never preachy. Check the frame first. Do pressure tests before you trust gauges. Write down parts cost before you start. That final habit, write it down, ties the entire story together. Narrative memory exaggerates wins and edits losses. Ledgers do neither. The Ramsey books from 2017 through 2025 show a farm that looked cornered, got constrained, chose a narrow path, executed with consistency, and emerged with ownership capacity, large enough to shape outcomes for other families too. The numbers do not flatter. They verify. If someone had judged Travis Ramsey in 2020 from the outside, old truck, reduced credit line, salvaged tractor on blocks, they could have predicted decline with confidence. That prediction would have matched the dominant model at the time. The model missed one variable: discipline compounded over long horizons under constraints. Constraints sharpened his decisions because every mistake would have carried immediate cost. Each accurate decision widened room for the next one. Room became resilience. Resilience became optionality. Optionality became ownership. By the time the county understood, Travis did not need to explain any of it. The deed book explained. The debt ledger explained. The trust agreements explained. The neighbors who got a second chance explained. Dusk on the Ramsey place in December 2025 looked ordinary. Shop lights on, grain truck parked. Nora finishing reconciliations. Travis checking a hydraulic line before weather turned. Ordinary from the road, precise from inside. 460 acres owned. Net worth $3,470,000. No banknote steering the next decision. A farm once marked as probable loss, now functioning as a stabilizer for itself and for others. The final verdict arrived in the same language that had carried the story from the start. Arithmetic measured over time. A dead 1979 Steiger bought for $7,800 and rebuilt with $16,400 in parts kept one farm operating when credit collapsed. The payment they did not take, approximately $22,000 each year, became principal reduction and reserve. The reserve became an $826,000 cash land purchase in February 2024. The ownership base became $3,470,000 in net worth by end of 2025. Misread became understood without confrontation. Work replaced performance. Numbers replaced argument.